If Satan ruled the world and he had a unified language, what language would everyone speak? That's right, English.
All right, let's see it.
Did you know that English is a Germanically derived, occult-influenced language?
You are correct that it is a Germanic language.
Why do you think our language is called spelling?
Our language is not called spelling.
Other languages do not derive their vocabulary words from witchcraft terms.
You got it backwards, Chief. The word spell, referring to sounding out the letters of a word, that comes from around 1400. The use of spell to refer to occult charms and incantations and stuff, that starts around 1570. The occult term borrowed from the generic English term.
The words in the English language were crafted by known occultists, like Sir Francis Bacon,
No, they weren't.
whom you may not have heard of, but you probably heard of his secret writing group called the Spear Shakers.
So this is a rather fringe conspiracy theory that was popular with scholars between around 1900 and 1950 or 60, but isn't taken seriously by scholars today.
Or should I say Shakespeare? Yeah, William Shakespeare was not a real person.
So William Shakespeare was absolutely a real person and absolutely the person who published the works of William Shakespeare. But starting in the 19th century, some theories began to pop up that all of his works were being ghostwritten either by groups or by individuals. And while Sir Francis Bacon was one of the individuals who, for a time, people considered one of the leading candidates, he's not really at the top of the list anymore. Edward de Vere is probably the most popular, but Christopher Marlowe was another person who has been identified as a potential ghostwriter of Shakespeare's plays. But these are pretty fringe theories that are not taken seriously by the majority of scholars.
And we know that because the writing styles in his different stories are drastically different.
That has pretty much nothing to do with where these theories came from.
William Shakespeare is responsible for introducing 1,700 words into our vocabulary.
So that would represent about 1% of the English words in use today and about 0.1% of the total English lexicon. And while that's enormous influence for one individual, the notion that that indicates the English language was influenced by the occult, setting aside the ludicrous theory that Shakespeare's works were occultist, is just nonsensical. That's not a representative portion.
William Shakespeare was not a real person. He was a group of individuals ran by Sir Francis Bacon, a known occultist, who
So now we're stacking fringe conspiracy theory upon fringe conspiracy theory.
had an agenda. He had an agenda to normalize witchcraft into our everyday speech.
There are absolutely no data that support the notion that this was an agenda of Sir Francis Bacon.
Speaking of normalizing things, what do you think Hollywood is?
It's a neighborhood in Los Angeles, California, incorporated in 1903 by H.J. Whitley.
Hollywood is the wood that witches and wizards use to craft their wands and staves out of.
I mean, nobody's stopping anybody from making a wand out of the wood of the holly bush, but I find no indication this is some long-standing tradition. But I do find the long-standing tradition of bringing holly branches into a house or putting them around a house to ward off witches, which we have stated by Pliny the Elder as far back as the 1st century CE, and found particularly in a lot of medieval texts.
It's a derivative of Hollywood. Yeah, Hollywood.
No, there's absolutely no etymological relationship whatsoever between holly and holy. Holly comes from a Proto-Germanic word, hulin, that goes back to a Proto-Indo-European word that probably meant something like to prick, whereas holy comes from the Proto-Germanic word heilige, which probably goes back to a Proto-Indo-European root that means something like whole, integral, or uninjured.
It's an extension of witchcraft.
No, it's not.
And to this day, it continues to craft our language even further.
The Hollywood viewing point is marked with a blood drop. And people still think it's a conspiracy. They rub it in our faces literally. Subliminal messages are everywhere. Share this to wake up a friend.
So there are absolutely no data that indicate this is supposed to represent a drop of blood or that this is a part of any grand conspiracy theory. This is private property where a sculpture has been installed, and that sculpture was created by an artist named Mineo Mizuno. And he does a number of these teardrop-shaped sculptures in all kinds of different colors. Check it out.
And I bet that blood drop is painted with real blood.
So just doing a modicum of research would help you base your theories on reality rather than what you imagine would be cool.
Hollywood continues, with all the movies and media and songs and things today, to distort our language.
So there are decades of psychological, sociological, cognitive research on these issues, and you picked out the anecdotally supported, ideologically driven assumptions of a former police officer who has absolutely no training or no experience whatsoever in the relevant fields of study to try to advance this rather silly assumption. This is not research.
Words in our language are intended to create confusion. Hence why the sun in the sky is the same word for the Son of God.
They're not the same word. They're not even spelled the same. They just sound the same. That's called a homophone. There are also words that are spelled the same and sound the same and are not the same word.
Do you not notice that there is a reason for the similarities in words?
So there's an enormous difference between noticing two words sound or look alike and imagining that there's some conspiratorial agenda behind that, and actually researching and being able to demonstrate that there is some conspiratorial agenda behind that. Right now, you are firmly planted in the former.
It's to create confusion between sun worship, which a lot of pagans did, and people that worship the Son of God.
The fact that it confuses you does not mean someone set out to confuse you.
Or like the word love. Has multiple different words in other languages, but in English, there's only one word for love.
So, loads of problems here. To begin, these words do not all mean love. They mean what is written underneath them in English. And the fact that you can write what they mean underneath them in English demonstrates that you can say the same things in English. Because if you had all those words and then you wrote love, 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 love under each of them, that might get closer to actually demonstrating what you're trying to demonstrate. It would be just as wrong as what you're trying to demonstrate, but at least you wouldn't be undermining your own point. Additionally, you've got a Latin word in there amidst all those Greek words. Ludus is not a Greek word, that's a Latin word. And pragma is a Greek word, but has absolutely nothing to do with love. It's a very generic Greek word that means thing, issue, concept, idea, event, something like that. And the last word on there is a compound word, and you've glossed it just fine with a compound word in English. So this is just laughably misguided.
It's the same reason why all of the cuss words in our language are all towards God.
They are not.
Like son of a bee. Why is that even a curse word? Son of a bee? Well, it's because the original terminology would be towards God. Jesus was the Son of God, and those that opposed him would say he's not the Son of God, he's the son of a bee.
There are no data whatsoever that support that connection. It most likely comes from a pejorative from Old Norse, and we first see it in Middle English in the 14th century.
These words are woven into our language, designed to make you curse yourself and others, to give easy access to demons to jump in and influence you. Because even hearing it can actually put curses on you.
This is all just pure and utter nonsense.